Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel and this amazing Express API series. I'm Aditya. In this video, we will create API routes for our users. So things related with user like updating a user and all those things. So without any further ado, let's begin. Okay, in the last video, we created a route for register. Let's just quickly create for login as well because it is related to user. So let's create that route as well. So here, I'm just going to copy this function from here and just going to do things differently. So what I'm going to do here is this is for register. I'm going to say for login, make sure you give the comma. It's an object, so we just need to make sure it is comma separated, request response. And here, if we say if there is not user, so if this is empty, then we send back saying that account doesn't exist or please register. And then what we need to do next is here we have hash password. So here instead of, yes, we will get the password from here, compare sync. And here the parameters for the compare sync will be the first, the plain text password and the encrypted password. So here, if we have a user, we can use user.password to get the user because we will use the email to get the user, and then we can use the user.password. And then if this is great, like if this works, then we can proceed forward. If not, we can send a response that password is incorrect. So here what I'm going to do is I can put that in if loop like this. And then if that's great, then I'm going to send the user details. So here I'm going to send specific details. ID is user.id. Then email is user.email. Password, not password, we need to say, let's say first name, email dot first name, and so on. And then if this is not right, let's say if this was not correct, then in that part else we send it res.send. We send same thing like this. We can straight away copy this from here and we will say here incorrect password. This should be actually 404 because it's like user not found. So you can send a 404 status, 400 for incorrect password, and that's great. So we have our login route ready. We also need to do validator for login. So new file, login validator.js. We can copy a few things from here, actually most of the things, and just remove, because we don't need first email and email for this. We don't need to have contact as well. So we just need email and password to be validated. And then once this is done, we can take it from here to our index.js. So in our index.js, we could say for a login route, which is going to be again a post request, we will use login validator, which we need to import it from here. So that's going to be login validator, and then index.js login validator. Let's just import it. There we go. We have it imported. We can, yeah, it's in a separate file. And from here, we could say login function. Perfect. So our login route is working. Let's give it a try. So postman login. We will use the same details. Let's remove this and let's see what do we get. Here, sorry, it should be user.email. Sorry, first name. Now if we send it again, there we go. We have the user. Perfect. So this is done. Now next thing, we can create a API route to update a user, and we can also create an API route to remove the user. So what I'm going to do is now these things, this register and login will be the public routes because they will be for creating a user and then sending back the token, which we will see it in the further video. But these routes are like public routes. So what I'm going to do is I'll create a separate controller again, which will be for user controller. And in this, if you notice for in register and login, we are using a function to get user by email. If we can get this in a separate, let's say in the user controller, if we can make a function which would be responsible for just getting a user by email, in that case, we don't have to rewrite things again and again. So what we could do is we can start by saying exports.user controller. And here we can have a function. Let's say it is a sync function, user by email. And here we take the email of the user. And then what we need to do is now, if you notice, we are connecting it and then we are getting user by email. Okay. So in this case, what we could do is if we want, we can keep the connection here, and then just copy the code from this. So let's say from here, like this, I'll take this from here and put it over here, get the user model, and then all I need to do here is I could say user controller dot find, sorry, was it find by email? Yeah, user by email actually. User by email. Actually, this should be get user by email or get by email. Let's do like this. Get user by email. Let's copy this from here, and this would be email like this. And this, if it's great, it will return user. Or what we will do is let's get this inside the user, const user equal to, and then return the user. And what we need to do is we can say that we await for this function, and here we pass the request.body.email. Great. Let's get this from here, this thing, and keep it over here as well, here. Perfect. Great. Let's see if we break anything. Possibly not. So if we see it again, yes, everything works fine. That's great. Now let's go back again and focus on our updating user. So here I'm going to say async update user. Now it's going to be request response. Now what's going to, okay, comma is still remaining. Here I'm going to say first await connect. Perfect. Then next thing we need to do is now here, what will happen is if I go to my user model, which is this one, here we are taking first name, password updation should be a different URL API for that, where you need to take the email and then you need to make sure that the email matches. And once it matches, you allow the user to update password, or you might want to do two-factor authentication and all those things. But when it comes to updating user, we should focus on updating the first name, last name, email, and contact if they specify. So only particular details which are allowed to be updated if they ask for. So what we are going to do here is to update the user, we will need the ID of that user for sure, because they need to send their ID from the front end, the user ID, authenticated user ID, or any user they're updating, and then we can update the details. Now, in this case, if I show you in my model as well over here, actually not model, but in dbconfig, we are having a foreign key that is team ID. So they might send a team ID in this case. If they send a team ID, then we should be able to, our update function should be flexible enough to update the things that are being passed. So what we are going to do here is we will check if the key that is being sent, if it's a password, we will ignore that key, but any other keys which are having correct values and they're passing our authentication request as well, we'll just keep them. Okay, so how to do that? Pretty simple. First, we will get all the body requests. So that's going to be request.body. And then what we are going to do is we will loop inside this and try to create a new object where we will see if there is a object or if there is a key with this password, we just remove it, or we can just modify this object as well. You don't need to create a new one. I'll tell you how to do it. So for var, sorry, let k in body. So this is going to be a JSON object. So we are iterating in that object. So this k will be every key in this body. Now, if there is a key of password, if k equal to password, because we don't want to update password from the update user function, we want to keep it a separate function. Then if you want to have it a same function, that's fine, but it's best to keep it a separate function. It's just my personal opinion, but if you have to keep it there, that's totally fine, no problem at all. So here we will do delete, and we will delete from the body the password key, or this one. Then we will have else if, what if there is key which is not a password, but this body of k, whatever that key is null, and body, or actually not and, if that body of whatever that key is, let's say email or whatever, is undefined, then in that case what we need to do is, actually this should be 3. So we want to check for the type as well, or let's keep it for a type. And then in this case, what we are going to do is we will delete again from the body that particular key. So what we are doing is we are removing all the null keys, undefined keys from our update request, and we are only updating those keys that are sent by the user. Okay, so let's give it another. So this is done. So now next we will be updating the user. So here I'm going to say let user equal to user dot update, and here it will take the values wherever we want to update, and there we can send the where as well. So if I show you the documentation for update, so simple update queries, in that we can pass the first parameter is the list of key value pairs that we want to update, and the second parameter is the where clause. So in this case we are going to say our body parameter, and then the next would be where id will be request dot param dot id. So this should be like this. Yeah, perfect. So that's great. Now what we are going to do is if the user is updated, we'll just return, let's console the user. Let's see what details we get once we update the user like this. And now let's bring in our user route here. Now there are two ways to do it. We can follow the same structure. We'll have app.post /user /update something like that. Or we can have separate routers for each API or a group of APIs, or we can group the routes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create here another folder, which is going to be routes. And inside this, I'm going to create a new folder, user routes.js. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get const router equal to require express, and from express I need the router functionality. Okay, from express I need the router functionality. Then I'm going to say router dot post. Now sorry, this is going to be a put request because it's an update request. You can use post, that's fine. Here I'm going to say update the user / now here we can give, I'll tell you what happens when we give the user here, and then we want to give the ID of the user ID, and then we will need our validator. So the validator will come here, and then we will have our function. So that function will be our user controller function. So user controller dot update user. And what we need to do here now is let's write the validator for this. So let's new file, update user validator.js. Now what we're going to do is most of these fields will be required in this. So actually not required. So this we can have it optional. That's why we are removing the blank keys, because we are only allowing those which are given by the user, and if we keep these keys optional, that means we are not making sure that they are required. So that's why you just need to remove it from our side. This will be also optional param. So from the param, that will be from express validator, we want to validate the ID that's gonna be like not empty. So it needs to be like mandatorily there. And next thing, we need to make sure that this ID is a number. So if I go to express validator, if I go to the documentation of validator.js, there you will see they have list of validation rules. So from there, we just need to find for the number one. There we go. So here is int. Now our ID is auto increment. That's why I'm using is int. If this wasn't auto increment, because it won't be a number, so in that case we won't use is int. Then once this is done, we can go back over here, bringing the validators. Our validator will be, we call it update user validator. Just need to make sure it's the same name here. Perfect. Let's send it over here. Update user validator. That's great. Now our API is somewhat ready. Now next thing we need to do is we need to export this router. So I'm going to say exports. Let's do a module export this time, module.export, because so far we are doing named export. So let's try this one this time. So router, and now in index.js, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in that router first. Actually, let's get these imports at the very top. Let's bring in the router. So const user router equal to require, that will come from router, sorry, routes, user routes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say whenever there is an API request which has a prefix of user, so any API request which is having prefix of user, for that API request use the user router. Okay, now let's try with an update API. So let's go over here. Let's create a new API request. So that will be, we can take this from here, no problem. So here, let's make this user. And did I give the update for user routes? Okay, we didn't give, okay, let's keep it like this. If you prefer the user with put request, then it will be update. Then let's give it a put request. Let's give it a try. Let's see what happens here. And also we are having user here. So what we need to do is we need to say, okay, remove this from here, and it will automatically prefix user before this. I'll show you how. And we still don't get a request. So if I show you here, we don't get any request, but here we can see that there is a promise. So let's see, because we are not sending a response from our controller. If you notice over here, we are not sending any response. So let's see what this user has. So if we do await over here, and now give it a try again from Postman. Let's try again. And now if we see over here, okay, this time we get server running great. And then if we try again with the post request, so we get number of users affected 0, because we didn't send, or we don't have anything to send or update, because nothing was updated. Because if we see our body, because we didn't send any of the parameters, like no parameters were sent. Now let's try to send some parameter. The reason being, we have our middleware before, like the express JSON. So let's keep it below. And now if we send, we will see the details. So if we send this, we will see one record affected. That's great. Have the email updated. That's great. And now it just shows us what query it was executing. So if I go back over here, so rest.send, or we can just send a message. No need to send number of records affected. We can send a message, user updated successfully. Because we are updating by ID, so it's going to be just one ID, so we don't need to worry about that. Let's create the get API route to get the user details. So what I'm going to do is it's going to be async function of get user, and that will be by ID. So we will need request response again. And this time what we are going to do is we will be simply going to first connect. Then we will be having the user await user.find by primary key. Our ID is the primary key, so it knows that it has to find by ID. So here I'm going to give just the identifier. It's going to be request dot body, or it should be actually in param, because we'll be using the URL parameters, and they're in ID. And then here I'm going to say if not user, then in that case we will say rest dot status of 404 JSON message, or we could do something like this, errors MSG user not found, or we just return rest.send user, but this time we don't need to send password. So what we are going to do is we are going to do, now here if you notice, we have to transform every time, like make sure that user don't have password. So we are writing those codes again and again. So what we could do is we can have a transformer in which we pass your details, and it will just delete particular details from it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new folder that will be our parser, or you can call it transformer, whatever you like to call. So this will be our user response parser.js. Now what this is going to do is exports dot user response parser. This is going to be a function. this function will take the details and it will return an object with id user.id. Email will be user.email. Now sometimes if there is no id, in that case it will just return null. Then we will need first name user.first name. Then we will need last name user.last name. Then we will need, what do we need? So we need the contact user.contact, these many fields. And then what we can do is we can simply here say response.send our parser. So that will be user response parser, pass in the user. We can also use the same principle for our login request. So we can go to our login request, which will be in the home controller. Here we are sending the details like that only. So here we could simply send the user details like this. And also in our register controller, which is this one. So here we could send the user details as well. Now what we can do is we just need to do something differently in update, because update is like, we just keep it update as it is, but forget, that's all fine. Now let's try to get a user, but before that we need to add this in our user route. So here I'm going to say router.get. Now this will be for the get request ID, and then it will have, we can use the middleware, but in this case we are already validating the ID over here. If that ID doesn't exist, we just send it back again. So in that case we can simply use get user function. Now let's go back over here, do a get request instead of put, and let's give it a try. So there we go, we have our user details returned properly. So that's great, everything is working great so far. Now we need to write a delete request. So I'm going to go back over here. This time it's going to be a delete request, delete and delete user. And then same rule, same drill, nothing different. What we are going to do is inside our user controller, we take this and here we say async delete user. Then we connect, we find the user by ID. If it doesn't exist, then we say user not found. If it exists, in that case, what we do is we first delete the user dot destroy, and then we send res dot status, or rather we could say send message user deleted successfully. Okay, let's try it out. Let's go for a delete request. Hit user deleted successfully. Now we shouldn't see any user with email example4.com. So if I refresh this, and yay, there we go, user deleted successfully. So that's perfect. So that's all in this video. In the next video, we will see how we can add JWT token and how we can do the JWT authentication. Now to save time for the Teams and project API, it's going to be something similar. In that case, we just need to, like the CRUD operation for team and project, I will do it behind the scene. And next video, we'll try to focus solely on JWT tokens. So see you in the next video. Till the next time, goodbye.